Most people pray 5 times a day their entire lives and never once truly pray. That is not a criticism. That is a diagnosis. Ibn Arabi, the greatest mystical intellect Islam ever produced, the man they called the greatest master, the Sheikh al-Akbar, spent his entire life trying to tell us something so vast and so devastating that most people simply could not hear it. He said that prayer, salat, the very thing Muslims 5 times of every single day, is not a ritual. It is not an obligation in the way we have reduced it to. It is not a checkbox, not a sequence of movements, not a performance of piety. He said, prayer is the only mirror in existence that can show you who you actually are. And here is where it becomes unbearable. Because if that is true, if prayer is a mirror, then consider what most of us are doing when we pray. We are standing before the most luminous, most infinite mirror in all of creation, and we are standing there with our eyes closed, going through motions, thinking about dinner, counting the minutes, reciting words we memorized as children and never once stopped to feel. Ibn Arabi would say that is not prayer, that is the shell of prayer. And you can spend 100 years performing that shell and never once touch the living core of what prayer actually is. He wrote in the Futuhat al-Makkiyah, his monumental masterwork that spans hundreds of chapters and covers the entire architecture of spiritual reality, that prayer moves through progressive levels. Each level is not just deeper than the last. Each level is a different dimension of existence entirely. You do not improve your prayer as you ascend. You discover that you were not praying at all until this point. And level 5. Level 5 is the one that rewrites everything you thought you knew about yourself, about God, and about the relationship between the two. 7 levels. 1 lifetime to travel them. The question is whether you will even begin the journey. This is the world of Ibn Arabi. Enter carefully. Because once you see what prayer really is, you cannot unsee it. And the comfortable mechanical ritual you have been calling prayer will never look the same again. The first level, the prayer of the body. In the beginning, there is the body. And before you dismiss this as too elementary, before you think you have already passed this level, pause. Because Ibn Arabi did not dismiss the body, he honored it. He said the body is the first language of prayer, and a language must be learned before it can be spoken with meaning. Most people, he believed, spend their entire lives mispronouncing this first language, and they never know it. The prayer of the body is about correct form. It is about wudu, the ritual purification that precedes prayer. It is about standing in the right direction, reciting correct words, performing the ruku, the bowing, and the sujud, the prostration, in the right sequence and with the right structure. In the legal schools of Islam, this is where the entire discussion of prayer lives. Is the prayer valid? Were the conditions met? Was the ablution performed correctly? Were the pillars of the prayer fulfilled? Ibn Arabi did not mock this. He said this outer dimension is real and it matters. The body is not the enemy of the spirit. In his metaphysical system, and Ibn Arabi's metaphysics is one of the most intricate ever constructed in the history of human thought. The physical world is not a prison from which the spirit must escape. The physical world is a manifestation, a tajalli, a self-disclosure of the divine. Every atom of material reality is at its root a name of expressing itself into existence. The body itself is sacred, so the prayer of the body is sacred. Standing, bowing, prostrating, these are not arbitrary actions. Ibn Arabi read tremendous meaning into each physical posture of prayer. The qiyam, standing upright before God, reflects the station of humanity as the vicegerent, the khalifa, the representative of the divine on earth. The human being is the only creature in creation that stands upright, and this is not an accident. It reflects a cosmic dignity, a special relationship between the human form and the divine reality it is designed to reflect. The ruku, bowing, is the acknowledgement of creaturely limitation. To bow is to say, I am not the ground of my own being. I do not sustain myself. There is something infinitely greater before which I bend. And Ibn Arabi notes that in bowing, the spine, which holds us upright in our dignity, now curves, and the head, the seat of intellect and ego, comes down from its position of superiority. This is not humiliation, this is truth-telling. The bow is the body being honest. And then the sujud, the prostration, the forehead to the earth, is the most charged gesture in all of Islamic worship. Ibn Arabi wrote about sujud with extraordinary depth. When the forehead touches the ground, the highest point of the human body meets the lowest point of the physical world. The seat of thought, of self-conception, of identity, the place where you carry the image of who you think you are, is pressed into the dust. And Ibn Arabi sees this as not merely symbolic, but as a physical enactment of a metaphysical truth. You came from clay, you will return to clay. And everything you think you are between those 2 points is a temporary pattern that God is making from himself to himself. In sujud, the body is being more honest than the mind will usually allow. But here is the problem that Ibn Arabi identifies at this first level. People learn the body movements, and they stop. They are satisfied. They can perform a structurally correct prayer with complete outward validity, and they feel they have prayed. And Ibn Arabi does not say this is nothing. He says this is real. But he says it is like learning the alphabet and believing you have learned literature. The letters are necessary, but they are not the poem. He also points to something more subtle at this level. The intention, the niyyah, that we declare before prayer. In classical Islamic jurisprudence, the niyyah is often treated as a technical legal requirement. You must intend to perform the prayer. But Ibn Arabi takes intention into a completely different dimension. He asks, what is the real niyyah? What is the deepest intention underlying the act of standing before God? Most people's intention, if they are honest, is to fulfill an obligation, to not have a debt against them, to earn reward. Even the most sincere among the early-level prayers are praying for something, for paradise, for forgiveness, for blessings in this world or the next. And Ibn Arabi says all of this is real and none of it is condemned, but he points towards something that most people never even imagine as a possibility. The intention of praying for nothing except the one you are standing before. Not even for reward. Not even for paradise, simply because he is. That intention, Ibn Arabi says, is where the journey truly begins, and most people never form it in their entire lives. The prayer of the body is the foundation. It cannot be skipped. The Prophet, upon him be peace, said, "Pray as you have seen me pray." The outer form was given to us. Ibn Arabi honors this absolutely. But he asks us to understand that the form was given as a container. And a container with nothing inside it is an object, not a vessel. The body must pray. And then the mind must wake up inside that praying body. Because the second level is not a replacement of the first. It is the first level opening its eyes. You have been doing the movements. Now, for the first time, understand what you are saying. The second level, the prayer of the Navind, you say Allahu Akbar and you begin the prayer. Do you know what you are saying? Ibn Arabi was obsessed, and that word is not too strong, with the meanings encoded in the phrases of prayer. He believed that the Arabic of the Quran and the liturgy of Salat were not simply human language. They were a divinely constructed lens through which reality could be seen differently if you looked through them with understanding rather than habit. Words repeated without understanding are sounds. Words understood are surgery on the soul. So what does Allahu Akbar actually mean? We translate it as God is great. But Ibn Arabi would say this translation, while not wrong, is drastically insufficient. Akbar is the comparative and superlative form of Kabir, great. God is greater. Greater than what? Greater than any conception you have of him. Greater than any image your mind has formed. Greater than the God you think you are addressing when you say these words. This is not just a declaration of divine power. It is a built-in epistemological warning embedded in the very opening of every prayer. You are being told, before you begin, that your understanding of what you are approaching is already too small. Every time you say Allahu Akbar, you are saying, whatever I think God is, he is greater than that. Ibn Arabi takes this deeper. He says the takbir, the opening declaration, is actually the act of setting aside your constructed self. The word kabara in Arabic carries the meaning of turning away from something, of abandoning it. When you say Allahu Akbar, you are not just praising God. You are leaving something behind. You are stepping out of ordinary consciousness and stepping into a different mode of being. The takbir is a door, and most people say the words that open the door but never walk through it. Then comes Surah Al-Fatiha, opening, which every Muslim recites in every rakat of every prayer, multiple times per day for their entire lives. Ibn Arabi wrote about Al-Fatiha at enormous length. He called it the mother of the Quran, al-Quran, and said it contains the entire spiritual architecture of existence compressed into 7 verses. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. In the name of God, the all-compassionate, the ever-merciful. Ibn Arabi points to the 2 names of divine mercy that frame this opening, Al-Rahman and Al-Rahim. These are not interchangeable synonyms. They describe 2 different modes of divine mercy. Al-Rahman is the mercy that exists prior to creation, the overflowing abundance of divine compassion that is the very reason if anything exists at all. Al-Rahman is the mercy that God extends to all of existence unconditionally, to believer and unbeliever, to Muslim and non-Muslim, to human and animal, to the entire cosmos. Al-Rahman is the mercy that precedes deserving. Al-Rahim is the mercy specific to relationship, the mercy of the covenant, the mercy that responds to turning back, the mercy that a person draws upon through their own orientation toward God. Ibn Arabi says that to begin in the name of Al-Rahman and Al-Rahim is to enter prayer inside the reality of unconditional and relational mercy simultaneously. You are not approaching an angry judge. You are not hoping to deserve something that might be withheld. You are stepping into a field of mercy that was always already there, and that your prayer is simply a way of consciously inhabiting. Then, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin, all praise belongs to God, the Lord of the worlds. This single verse contains what Ibn Arabi considers one of the most important theological points in all of Islam. Notice it does not say, I praise God. It says all praise belongs to God. Every praise that has ever existed, every gratitude that any creature has ever felt toward anything, every appreciation for beauty or goodness or truth anywhere in creation, all of it, in its root and its reality, is flowing toward the divine. You did not create your ability to praise. The praise itself is not yours. When you feel grateful for anything in your life, Ibn Arabi says, the secret is that God is being grateful to himself through you for what he himself has given. This is not a comfortable idea. It is a destabilizing one, and destabilization, Ibn Arabi suggests, is the point. Yaka nabudu wa yaka nasta'in. You alone we worship and you alone we ask for help. Here the prayer shifts suddenly from third person to second person. We have been speaking about God. Praise belongs to him. He is the Lord of the worlds. He is the master of the day of judgment. And then suddenly, without ceremony, the grammar changes. We are suddenly speaking directly to God, not about God but to him. Ibn Arabi considers this grammatical shift to be spiritually momentous. He says it represents a transition in the very nature of consciousness happening within the prayer. Before this verse, the one praying is a person making statements about a distant reality. After this verse, the one praying is a person standing in relationship. The distance collapsed. The conversation began, and the verse itself is extraordinary. Not, we try to worship only you, not, we attempt to give our devotion only to you. The verb is present continuous and absolute. It is a declaration of a reality, not just an aspiration. But how can this be true, Ibn Arabi asks, when we so clearly and obviously give our attention and energy to so many things that are not God? He answers this with one of the most beautiful and disturbing ideas in all of his thought. Everything in existence is a name of God in manifestation. When you love anything truly, when you love beauty or truth or justice or a person with sincere love, you are, at a level deeper than you know, loving the name of God that is shining through that thing. The tragedy of ordinary human experience is that we love the form and do not see the source. But the love itself is always for God, whether we know it or not. This means that Iyaka nabudu, you alone we worship, is not a description of our achieved state of purity. It is a metaphysical fact about the structure of existence that we are being invited to consciously recognize. Everything in creation is in its inner reality, a face of the divine. Every act of love is, at its root, a face of divine love recognizing itself. The prayer of the mind is the level at which these meanings begin open. You recite Al-Fatiha not as a phonetic sequence but as a living map. You say Allahu Akbar, not as a starting signal but as a genuine acknowledgement that the one you are approaching exceeds your comprehension entirely. You say Iyaka nabudu, and you feel the shock of realizing that you do not fully understand what you are claiming. This level is already a transformation from the first. People who pray at this level are genuinely different from people who do not. They have activated meaning inside the form. The container now holds something. But Ibn Arabi says the mind, for all its power, is still a veil. The mind categorizes. It defines, it creates concepts about God and then worships those concepts. The greatest danger of intellectual prayer is that you become so satisfied with your understanding of the meanings that you mistake your understanding for the reality itself. You create a sophisticated, theologically rich, philosophically elaborate idol, and the idol is your own intellect. The third level dissolves this idol, but it does not do so through more thinking. It does so through the heart breaking open. The third level, the prayer of the heart. There is a famous hadith, a saying of the Prophet Muhammad, upon him be peace, that haunted Ibn Arabi throughout his life. The Prophet said, pray as if you see God, and if you cannot see him, then know that he sees you. Most people read this as a description of two levels. The advanced level, where you see God, and the beginner level, where you at least maintain awareness that God sees you. Ibn Arabi read it as something far more structured and demanding. He said this single hadith is a map of the entire journey of prayer, and most people live their entire lives somewhere below even the second level of that map. Because to know that God sees you, truly know it, not as a theological statement but as a felt reality in the body, in the chest, in the living moment of prayer, is already a station far beyond what most people reach. This is the prayer of the heart, and its central quality is one word: khushu. Khushu is usually translated as humility or contrition or reverence. But Ibn Arabi says these translations point at khushu without capturing it. Khushu is the state in which the heart becomes soft, in which the walls the ego has built between itself and reality become permeable, in which something in you, something deeper than thought and more fundamental than emotion, becomes genuinely present in the encounter with the divine. The Arabic root of khushu conveys the idea of a landscape becoming still, the wind dropping, the water becoming calm, the noise ceasing. It is not an achievement. You cannot force khushu. You can only remove the obstacles to it. And the primary obstacle, Ibn Arabi says, is the self that is always talking. We are, most of us, perpetually narrating our own experience. We stand in prayer and a continuous internal monologue runs alongside the recitation. We think about whether we are praying well. We evaluate our own concentration. We notice that we noticed something and then notice our noticing. We plan what we will do after prayer. We replay conversations from earlier in the day. And beneath all of this noise is a constant, subtle, almost invisible act of self-presentation. The self performing itself, for itself. The ego maintaining its sense of its own existence through an unbroken stream of self-referential thought. Khushu is the cessation of that narration. And this is why it is so rare and so difficult. Because the narration is not something we do consciously. It is what ordinary mind does by default. To stop the narration is not a matter of willpower. You cannot command the self to stop talking about itself. Attempting to do so only produces more self-focused thought. I am now trying to stop thinking about myself. Now I am thinking about whether I am succeeding in not thinking about myself. Ibn Arabi points to a different approach entirely. He says khushu is not the result of suppressing the inner noise. It is the result of the heart becoming so saturated with the presence it is turning toward that the noise becomes irrelevant. Not silenced by force but made insignificant by something more compelling. Think of a person who is told devastating news. In the moment of genuine shock, the inner monologue stops. Not because that chose to stop it, but because reality broke through the narration. The thought stream is not stronger than reality. It is simply what fills the space when reality is held at arm's length. Prayer, Ibn Arabi suggests, is the practice of letting reality break through. And the heart, not the intellectual heart of metaphor, but the actual spiritual organ he calls the qalb, is the faculty that can be broken open by reality in a way the mind cannot. The qalb in Ibn Arabi's system is extraordinary. He says the word qalb comes from the Arabic root that means to turn, to flip, to be constantly changing. The heart is the organ that turns toward God, away from God, toward the world, back toward the divine. It is the most volatile and the most capacious thing in the human being. The Prophet said, "The heart of the believer is between two fingers of the All-Merciful, who turns it however he wills." The heart does not belong to you. It is the place where divine influence enters the human being most directly. And in the prayer of the heart, the task, if task is even the right word, is to bring the heart into alignment with what the mouth is saying and the body is doing. To have the three dimensions of the human being, body, mind, heart, moving together in the same direction, toward the same reality, at the same time. This sounds simple. It is the most difficult thing there is. Ibn Arabi writes about a particular quality that begins to emerge in the prayer of the heart, the quality of wajd. Wajd is usually translated as spiritual rapture or ecstasy, but once again these translations flatten something three-dimensional into two dimensions. Wajd means finding. It shares its root with the word for existence, wujud, and it means the moment in which the heart finds what it was always looking for. It is not manufactured emotion. It is not the performance of religiosity. It is the involuntary response of the heart to contact with something real. People who have experienced wajd in prayer describe it in different ways. Some speak of tears that come without sadness, a weeping that feels like relief. Some speak of a stillness so complete that the prayer seems to stretch and the sense of time distorts. Some speak of a warmth in the chest that is not physical heat, of a sense of being known, not observed, not judged, but known, completely, without concealment possible or necessary. Ibn Arabi says, these are signs that the heart has, however briefly, moved from the prayer of performance to the prayer of presence. But even at this third level, something remains. The one who prays with khushu, the one who sometimes experiences wajh, they are still someone. There is still a subject who is having this experience. There is still an I who is present before God, and that I, however sincere and however moved, is still somewhat in the way. Because God does not need to be approached from a distance. And the I that approaches is itself a veil. The fourth level begins to thin that veil. It is the level at which the mystic stops approaching God and begins to witness God. From inside the prayer, inside the breath, inside the very act of living. This is where the journey becomes genuinely strange, and genuinely beautiful. The fourth level, the prayer of witnessing. Ibn Arabi makes a distinction that changes everything once you understand it. He distinguishes between two fundamental modes of spiritual consciousness, and he locates them as two entirely different relationships to prayer. The first mode is mushahada, witnessing. The second is muraqaba, watching over, or vigilant contemplation. Most people, if they are spiritually serious, live in muraqaba. They are watching for God. They are vigilantly attentive. They are trying to maintain awareness of the divine throughout their lives, and especially in prayer. This is noble, this is real, and Ibn Arabi honors it completely. But mushahada is different. Mushahada is not watching for God. It is the station in which God is simply seen, not sought, not watched for, not hoped for, seen. Undeniable. As immediate as the fact of one's own existence. The fourth level of prayer is the beginning of mushahada. To understand what Ibn Arabi means here, we need to enter, at least briefly, into the architecture of his metaphysical vision, his doctrine of wahdat al-wujud, the oneness of being. This is perhaps the most discussed, most misunderstood, and most profound idea in all of Islamic mysticism. Ibn Arabi does not say, as some of his critics have wrongly claimed, that God and creation are identical. He does not say that you are God in the crude sense, that the coffee cup on your table is God, that there is no distinction between creator and created. What he says is far more nuanced and far more shattering. He says that existence is one, that there is only one being, al-wujud, and that this being is the divine reality, what he calls al-haq, the real. And he says that what we call creation, the universe, the multiplicity of things, you and I and stars and mountains and rivers, is not something other than this one being. It is this one being appearing to itself through an infinite variety of forms. The forms are real. The multiplicity is real. Your individual existence as a particular human being is real. But it is real in the way that a wave is real on the ocean. The wave has genuine form, genuine motion, genuine identity. But it is not other than water. It does not have a separate existence from water. You remove the ocean, there would be no wave. And yet the ocean is not the wave. The ocean is infinitely greater than any wave. And it gives rise to infinite waves while itself remaining what it is. You are a wave in the ocean of divine being. And prayer, at the fourth level, is the wave becoming aware of the ocean. Now, what does this mean in the actual lived experience of prayer? Ibn Arabi says that at this level, something begins to happen with the famous phrase La ilaha illa Allah. There is no God but God, the central affirmation of Islamic monotheism. Most people understand this as a statement about worship. I will not worship anything except the one God. This is correct at the first and second levels. But at the fourth level, the phrase begins to reveal a deeper layer of its meaning. La ilaha illa Allah. There is no existence except the one existence. There is no reality except the one reality. Everything that seems to exist independently, separately, in its own right, all of it is in its inner reality, nothing but the self-disclosure of the one being. When this begins to penetrate the heart during prayer, the prayer changes character entirely. The one praying is no longer standing at a distance from God and sending words across that distance. The distance itself is revealed as an appearance, a form that the one reality has taken, a way in which the infinite has created the experience of finitude and separation, so that it might know itself through the experience of return. Ibn Arabi quotes the famous Hadith Qudsi, the divine saying spoken by God through the Prophet, in which God says, I was a hidden treasure and I love to be known, so I created creation. In this saying, Ibn Arabi sees the entire reason for existence. God, in his pure singularity, created a space, called creation, in which he could be known, in which he could experience himself through the knowing of created beings. And the highest form of this knowing is prayer. Specifically the prayer that has advanced to the stage of witnessing. Because in the prayer of witnessing, the one praying becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, the divine reality sees itself, and that seeing is simultaneously the one praying's vision of God and God's vision of himself. The two are not separate events. Ibn Arabi uses the metaphor of the mirror extensively. A mirror has no light of its own. It reflects the light that falls upon it. The mirror does not generate the image comes from outside. But without the mirror, the image would have no place to appear. The mirror is not the source of light, but it is necessary for the appearance of light in that particular form. The human being, at the fourth level of prayer, is learning to be a pure mirror, to empty the self of its own content, its preoccupations, its self-image, its opinions, its desires, so that the light of the divine can appear in it without distortion. This is why sujud prostration holds such a special place in Ibn Arabi's understanding of prayer. In sujud, the forehead touches the earth. The Prophet said, "The closest a servant is to his Lord is when he is in prostration." And Ibn Arabi asks, why is this? Not merely because of the humility of the posture, though that matters, but because in complete prostration, the ego is most fully surrendered. The self that stands upright in its dignity, the self that thinks and plans and evaluates, that self is physically, viscerally brought down, and in that bringing down the mirror is most clear. Some of the greatest mystics in the Islamic tradition reported that their most overwhelming experiences of divine presence came in sujud, not in the intellectual heights of contemplation, not in the peaks of emotional rapture, but with the forehead on the ground, because the ground is the place where the self runs out of room to maintain itself. The prayer of witnessing is still not the final reality. The mirror is clear, but the mirror still knows it is a mirror. The wave is aware of the ocean, but it still feels itself to be a wave. There is still an experiencer experiencing the divine presence, and that experiencer, however refined, however empty, is still a subject in a subject-object relationship with God. And subject-object relationships, however exalted, are still relationships between two things. The fifth level abolishes the two. This is why it changes everything. The fifth level. The prayer of annihilation. We have arrived. And the first thing to say about this level is that no words can adequately describe it. Ibn Arabi himself, who had more words for the inner life than perhaps any writer in human history, repeatedly acknowledged this. He wrote around this level, approached it from every angle, described its effects and its approach and its aftermath, but the center of it, the actual experience itself, he said is beyond language, because language requires a speaker and a listener, a subject and an object. And this level is precisely the dissolution of the subject-object divide. What we are entering is the territory of fana, annihilation. Fana is the most famous and most feared concept in Islamic mysticism. The Sufis speak of it constantly. Rumi wrote about it. Al-Hallaj died because of it. Al-Ghazali almost went mad approaching it. And Ibn Arabi, who went further into its theoretical articulation than anyone before or since, said that most people who use the word fana do not know what they are talking about. Because fana is not death. It is not the destruction of the human individual. It is not the disappearance of your unique form or your personal existence. It is something stranger and more beautiful and more terrifying than any of these descriptions. Fana is the annihilation of the illusion of independent selfhood while the self remains. Let me try to approach this from the direction that Ibn Arabi approaches it. In his system, every human being has two aspects, the zahir and the batin, the outer and the inner, the form and the reality. The outer aspect of the human being is the specific, particular, individual person, the body, the personality, the name, the history, the relationships, the characteristics. This outer aspect is real. It is not an illusion to be discarded. But the inner aspect of the human being is something else entirely. Ibn Arabi calls it the Hadra al-Insaniya, the human presence or human station, and he says it is the place in the human being that most directly reflects the divine reality. It is the aspect of the human being that is made in the image of God, as the Hadith says, God created Adam upon his own form. And this inner aspect, at its deepest root, is not separate from the divine. It is not that the human being is God. It is that the deepest ground of human existence opens, at its root, into the ground of divine existence. The two are not identical, but they are not separate either. They are, in a sense that ordinary language cannot capture, one without being the same. Fana, in the context of prayer, is the moment in which this truth is not merely known intellectually or even experienced emotionally, but lived. directly and without mediation. The one praying is saying the words of prayer. And then, at a certain point, there is no longer someone saying the words. The words are happening. The prayer is occurring. But the sense of a separate self that is performing the prayer, the I who is praying, that sense dissolves. What remains is prayer without a prayer. Praise without someone praising. Prostration without someone prostrating. Ibn Arabi points to a moment in the prayer of the Prophet himself as the highest example of this. When the Prophet, upon him be peace, received revelation, when the Quran descended into his heart, it was not a transaction between a divine sender and a human receiver. It was something far more intimate. Ibn Arabi says the Prophet's heart, in those moments, was so purely a mirror of the divine, that the distinction between the receiving heart and the light being received became vanishingly thin. The Prophet is reported to have said, "I have moments with God in which neither angel brought near nor prophet sent can contain me." This statement, which some find alarming, Ibn Arabi takes as a description of fana, the moment in which the human vessel is so transparent to the divine reality, that even the comparison with the noblest of spiritual beings becomes inappropriate, because in that moment, the human is not being compared to anything. It is simply being. In the fifth level of prayer, the Allahu Akbar at the beginning of prayer is no longer a declaration made by a person. It is the divine reality recognizing itself through the form of a person. The recitation of Al-Fatiha is no longer a human reciting divine words. It is the divine reality speaking its own meanings through a human tongue. The sujud is no longer a human being prostrating before God. It is God in his form as a human being, bowing to the aspect of himself that is the absolute. This may sound, to ordinary ears, like madness or blasphemy. Ibn Arabi was accused of both repeatedly and viciously, during his lifetime and for centuries after. But he insisted with absolute clarity that he was saying nothing contrary to the Quran, nothing contrary to the Sunnah, nothing contrary to the deepest spirit of Islamic teaching. He was only saying what the Quran itself says. Wherever you turn, there is the face of God, and we are closer to the human being than his jugular vein. And he is the first and the last, the manifest and the hidden. At the fifth level of prayer, these are not verses that the one praying hears and interprets. These are verses that the one praying lives. Now, and this is crucial for understanding Ibn Arabi's complete vision. Fana is not the... Ibn Arabi was very careful about this, because some of the mystics before him had treated fana as the ultimate destination, and had, in a sense, gotten lost in the dissolution. They had disappeared into the ocean and never come back. And Ibn Arabi said, that is not the perfection. That is a station, a profound and real station, but not the final one. Because the ocean needs waves. The wave that knows it is the ocean but continues to be a wave. That is more complete than the wave that dissolves entirely and is never seen again. This is why the sixth level exists. Fana is not a destination, it is a door. And through that door, the human being who went in as a self comes out as something that Ibn Arabi can only describe as a mirror of the absolute. But first, the fire of the fifth level must be completed, not rushed, not spiritually bypassed or theoretically approximated. The human being must actually travel through the dissolution. And this, Ibn Arabi says, is the work of decades of sincere prayer, practiced across years of genuine surrender, accumulated through thousands of prostrations in which the self was genuinely, incrementally, surrendered. There is no shortcut to annihilation. And anyone who claims to have reached fana quickly or easily has, in almost every case, reached a beautiful mental experience of the concept of fana, which is not fana. Fana is the flame. The sixth level is what is left when the burning is complete. The sixth level, the prayer of subsistence after annihilation, substance. After fana, baka. This pairing, fana wa baka, annihilation and subsistence, is one of the most important paired concepts in all of Sufi thought. But Ibn Arabi's treatment of baka is distinctive and goes further than almost any of his predecessors. The question that baka answers is, what comes back after fana? What remains when the illusion of separate selfhood has been burned through? If fana were simply destruction, the answer would be nothing. But Ibn Arabi says something remains, something returns. And what returns is not the same as what went in. Think of it this way. Gold is refined in fire. The gold does not come out of the fire as a different substance. It is still gold. But it comes out purified. What was burned away was not the gold. What was burned away was everything that was mixed in with the gold. The dross, the impurities, the foreign matter. The fire did not destroy gold. The fire revealed gold. Fana burns away the dross of the ego self, the constructed identity, the habits of self-reference, the patterns of self-seeking, the sense that the us is the center of its own existence. And Baka is what is left, the pure human reality that was always there, beneath the layers of accretion. And this pure human reality, Ibn Arabi says, is something breathtaking. It is the human being in their original nature, what he calls the al-fitra, the primordial disposition in which God created each soul before it entered the material world. In the famous Quranic moment of the covenant, the Alastu bi Rabbikum, the moment when God gathered all souls before creation and asked, "Am I not your Lord?" And they said, "Yes, we testify." In that moment, every soul was in its pure original state, directly facing its Lord, without the veils that embodied existence would later create. Baka is the recovery of that original state, not as a memory, not as a spiritual nostalgia, but as a living present reality. The one who has passed through Fana and entered Baka is living, in their everyday human existence, in the state that their soul was in before creation. And now, in the prayer of subsistence, the prayer is transformed again, because the one praying is no longer operating from a self that approaches God. They are operating from a self that is transparent to God. Every movement in prayer is simultaneously a human movement and a divine movement. The words come from a human mouth and simultaneously from the divine reality that animates that mouth. The prostration is made by a human forehead on the earth, and it is simultaneously the divine bowing to itself through the form of a human being. Ibn Arabi describes a quality that characterizes prayer at this level, and he calls it hadir, presence. Not presence in the sense of concentration or focus, which are qualities of the third and fourth levels. Presence at this level means that every element of the prayer is fully inhabited, not by the individual self trying to be present, that self has been reduced to transparency, but by the divine reality that is now unobstructed, present in and as the one praying. He also introduces at this level the concept of the perfect human, al-insan al-kamil. This is one of Ibn Arabi's most celebrated and most complex ideas. The perfect human is not a moral description, someone who has achieved great virtue. It is an ontological description, someone who has actualized the full potential of what the human being is designed to be. And what the human being is designed to be is this: a being through which the entirety of the divine names and attributes are perfectly reflected. God has infinite names, Al-Rahman, Al-Rahim, Al-Qadir, Al-Alim, Al-Sami, Al-Basir, and on into names that have no human word. Each name is an attribute of the divine reality, and the human being, uniquely among all created things, has the capacity to be a comprehensive mirror of all of these names simultaneously. A mountain reflects divine power. An ocean reflects divine vastness. An angel reflects divine purity. But the human being, in their fullness, can reflect all of these simultaneously: power and mercy and knowledge and will and beauty and majesty, all at once, in a single being. This is why the Hadith says God created Adam upon his form. The human form is the only form in creation designed to be a comprehensive mirror of the divine reality. And in the prayer of subsistence, this is what is happening. The one praying is not just a human being doing an act of worship. They are the universe's most sophisticated mirror, turned fully toward the source of all light, reflecting back to God the complete image of his own infinite reality, in a single particular, irreplaceable human form. Ibn Arabi says that the Prophet Muhammad, upon him be peace, was the supreme example of al-insan al-kamil. Not because he was God, the Prophet is absolutely, unambiguously a human being and a servant, but because he was the most complete human mirror of the divine reality that ever existed. When the Quran says, "We did not send you except as a mercy to all the worlds," this is Ibn Arabi's understanding of what that mercy is. The Prophet is a mercy to all the worlds because he is the complete reflection of the divine reality into the human form, and by existing as that reflection, he makes it possible for others to find that reflection in themselves. The sixth level of prayer is the prayer of the one who is walking the path of the Prophet, not as an imitation but as a genuine becoming. And the seventh level is where that becoming arrives at its destination, or perhaps more accurately, recognizes that it was always already there. The seventh level, the prayer of Dhriel, we have reached the place where all description fails, not because nothing can be said. Ibn Arabi said plenty. He was constitutionally incapable of saying nothing. His works fill volumes, some of the densest and most precise spiritual writing in the history of any tradition. But what he said about this level, he said primarily through indirection, through paradox, through poetry, through the negation of negations. Because the seventh level cannot be approached frontally, it can only be circled. Ibn Arabi calls this level the prayer of al-Haq, the prayer of the real, the prayer of truth. And he means something very precise by this. Al-Haq is one of the names of God in the Islamic tradition. It means the real, the true, the actual, the one being whose existence is not dependent on anything outside itself, the one reality that is self-grounding, self-sustaining, self-explanatory. And at this seventh level, he says something that no ordinary reading of Islamic theology would prepare you for. He says that at this level, God prays through the human being. Not that the human being prays to God. Not that the human being prays in a state of closeness to God, but that God, in his form as this particular human being, is the subject of prayer, its object, and the act of praying itself. To understand this, we need to return to Ibn Arabi's vision of divine self-disclosure, the Tajalliyat. He says that God, in his pure essence, what he calls the Hadra al-Ahadiyya, the presence of absolute unity, is beyond all description, beyond all names, beyond all relationship, beyond even the word God, because God already implies a relationship to something that is worshipped. In his pure essence, there is only the absolute reality of being, which is, by its